This also applies to those people who really, really trigger us, who set us off. I mean, as I said, there's lots of people who do things that are wrong, and we can take stands and say, no, this is not appropriate. But I'm talking about where we have this strong emotional response where they do this or say things in a certain way, and we just, boom, we feel this reaction in us. How often has something gone sideways for you and you've spent hours perhaps or even days frustrated about it, telling everybody how bad it is and getting all caught up in the caca from that, which holds you back from actually moving forward? What if you could defuse that very quickly so that you could let it go, move past it, and move forward to find something that works more effectively? That's what we're going to explore today. I'm Ravi Tangri, and this is Soulgeneering Your Life and Your Work. How to bring more of your heart and soul into your life, your work, everything that you do. A few years ago, I had someone working on my website, doing web design, and things were going along really well. And all of a sudden, he just ghosted me. There was no response to anything, to emails, to phone calls, nothing I could do to get a response. And I didn't know what was happening. And I just kept getting worked up and frustrated. And I would spend time talking to my friends about, what's going on and how it was messing things up. And it went on for days. And then I finally realized something, remembered actually this concept, and was able to almost instantly defuse it and just move on. And it was a very simple solution to, okay, this is not working. This guy's not responding. I've got to find a way that works. Let's move forward. The frustration was not producing anything effective, and I was able to totally defuse that so I could just move forward with the principle we're going to get into today. And the thing to think about here is it's not just people that are doing things wrong. There are a lot of people who do things wrong out there. It's those people that just really push your triggers, that are like fingernails on chalkboard, that really set you off. That's what I'm talking about defusing. So to get at this, we first have to sort of understand where this is coming from. So I want to just introduce you to a simple concept that can help with this. There's a framework called the Johari window. And if you've got a pen and paper nearby, you can sort of draw this out as I talk about it, or you can just imagine it in your head. Imagine that there's a square, or draw a square, and that square represents everything that you are. Now, draw a vertical line somewhere that divides the square into two columns. Doesn't matter exactly where. On the left-hand side of that line, the left-hand column, are those aspects of you, your personality, that others see. On the right-hand side are those aspects that others don't see. So there are things that you keep to yourself that you don't show others or most others, right? So there's two aspects to your personality and who you are. So that's a vertical line. Now imagine that there's a horizontal line also cutting that square in two. Again, doesn't matter where. And above that line, the top row is the things that you are aware of. And below that line are those aspects of your personality that you are not aware of. Okay, so what we've got now is four quadrants. The top left quadrant are those things that other people see and you see. So that's your visible face you're very well aware of. The bottom column are those things that other people see about you. The bottom square on the left is those things that other people see about you, but you don't see about yourself. So those are things that you're really not aware of. And the way you find out about those are from good friends, people you can talk to and say, okay, what am I not seeing? What are you seeing that I'm doing? What are the things? And you can get feedback from people that know you well to sort of start to understand those things that you're not aware of, why you may be reacting. And some of these reactions may come from there. The top right square are those aspects of yourself that you're aware of, but other people don't see. So you're already aware of those behaviors, but that leaves on the bottom right those aspects of your personality that you can't see and others don't really see for the most part as well. There may be one or two people who know you well enough to see those, but for the most part, they don't. And that's what we call the blind spot. And that's the most challenging thing, to find what's going on in that blind spot. What are the things that you're doing where you may be sabotaging yourself? And the size of these squares varies for all of us. For some of us who do a lot of personal work, we're much more aware of ourselves and our personality. So there's not as much that's hidden. For those of us who are not so self-aware, that blind spot and also the part that others see that you may not see may be quite large. Okay, so it's going to vary, and it may vary in context, right? There's certain people who know you better, certain ones who don't. But our brains are interesting. They have a way of showing us where we might be holding us back. We get all sorts of information coming into our brains. There's this so much information that we would be overloaded if we were consciously aware of it all. It's just too much to process. But what we have is a system in there called the reticular activation system. And what that does is it filters out those things that are most relevant to us. So things that are important to us. And that can be, for example, if you're buying a car, you may drive the same route to work every day. All of a sudden you decide to buy a car, and you see this billboard with just the perfect car that you want. All of a sudden, that billboard has been there for months, but you had no interest in a car. Now that you do, it suddenly appears to you, and you're aware of it. It also ties into things that are emotionally important to us. So things that are very much like us. So what this brings out for the blind spot are those things about us that we may not yet see, we may not yet admit, but they are who we are, and they're mirrored outside. So we resonate with that, and that filter allows us to see that. So, for example, think of someone you really, really admire, and I'm thinking where you've got a really strong emotional response. Okay, the reason that you admire that person is that they are exhibiting qualities, values that you either are living or that you aspire to. Okay. So that's one simple way I find in some workshops to help people connect with what are their core values, is to look at who are the people that you really admire and why is that? What are the values that they live by? Which are those values that have the most energy? And values are not something we think and consciously do. They're very unconscious. They're very emotional. And those values that we admire in that person are usually strong for us because they are our internal values. And so that person is mirroring who we are. And that's why it comes through our filters. And we see that and we pay attention. So you may not think that you're this person who's done amazing things, but you strive to be like them. You've got very similar values to them. And that's why they jump out at you and you resonate so strongly with them. So that's one aspect of this mirror principle that we're getting into. Here's the thing that most people have real difficulty with. This doesn't just apply to people who we admire. This also applies to those people who really, really trigger us, who set us off. I mean, as I said, there's lots of people who do things that are wrong, and we can take stands and say, no, this is not appropriate. But I'm talking about where we have this strong emotional response where they do this or say things in a certain way, and we just, boom, we feel this reaction in us. And the reason that we have that intense reaction, I believe, and that I've found through all the work that I've done, is that we're not necessarily literally doing what they are. If someone is abusive and a bully, that doesn't mean that we are, but they are reflecting in some way something that we are already doing within ourselves. And for example, if someone's a bully and it really bothers us and we get really upset when we see that sort of bullying behavior, it doesn't mean that we are a bully. But the question that I always ask myself is, where am I not being respectful? And it may be to someone else. It may also be to myself. I may not be respecting what I'm feeling, what I want, and I am sort of bullying myself and beating myself down because I'm trying to do something else. I'm not listening to what I want to do inside. And the challenge here is not to go into guilt and blame. It's just to see that this is feedback. The reason this is coming through our filters and we're reacting so strongly with it is there's something inside us that's resonating with it. So the thing is here, to me, that what is totally useless is when we spend all those hours frustrated, angry, ticked off, and we can totally justify it because that other person is behaving so inappropriately. But the thing is, being in that stress response, that angry response, does not allow us to do anything productive moving forward. One of the key features of the stress response, the fight or flight response, is it shuts down the brain, because when the saber-toothed tiger is coming, you do not need to do a cost-benefit analysis. You either hide or you run. Okay, it's pretty clear. You do not need the brain. And so the other thing is, whenever we're in that sort of frustrated, angry, reactive response, we are pumping toxic chemicals through our body. It triggers over 30 hormonal changes and 1,300 chemical changes, some of which go on for hours, aging us, breaking down our immune systems, wearing us down. It's not productive. What I want to get at is, how can you defuse it? So if the reason that it's triggering us is that there's something that we're doing that's resonating with it, we can't necessarily change the other person. But you know what? We have 100% control over ourselves. So, for example, with that web designer who's ghosting me and just not responding, I know exactly what happened. He fell behind on his deadlines and he felt guilty and didn't know how to admit it. I didn't know how to say it. And so it was easier to just run away than to actually face that. My response was saying, okay, where am I doing this? Where am I avoiding responsibility? Where am I not having conversations that I need to have? And I found that there was a situation with a friend that there was a very difficult, tense thing, and I had been putting off having that tough conversation. And so what I found is, the moment I actually realized it and then reached out and created the space to have that conversation, all of a sudden, nothing had changed in the outer world, but I wasn't wasting my time and energy with anger and frustration over this guy who was not getting back to me. I was able to take back control of my life, myself, and take action. And I just found someone else to do the work. Hey, you know what? I lost that time. I lost that money. I'm not going to waste any more energy on that issue. Let's move forward. I can take action. I'm not talking about condoning bad behavior by others. I'm not talking about taking away their responsibility for what they've done. I'm saying, why should we poison ourselves when we can't control them? Why should we hold ourselves back, impair ourselves, and and lower the quality of our life over something that we didn't do? It's not about them, it's about us. And I find that this is not about guilt or blame. This is about being responsible. I am able to respond. And so what the mirror principle lets me do is when I get triggered, I step back and all of a sudden this person that was my greatest nemesis becomes my greatest teacher to show me what I didn't yet have the courage to face within myself. And I can't control them, but I have total control over myself. And the moment I shift myself, my reaction to them changes. Now, if they're doing something inappropriate, I can now respond in a much more balanced, much more healthy way, instead of in a reactive, frustrated, upset way that never really produces any effective outcomes. So here's the thing that I found is that when you do that, when you apply this mirror principle and say, what are they reflecting in me that I haven't yet faced, that I can shift? One of three things happens. The first is like what happened with that web designer. They still do what they did, but it doesn't trigger you. So now, okay, this behavior is inappropriate. How do I respond? Not from an upset place, but from a centered, grounded, resourceful place. And that is incredibly powerful. So instead of wasting all that energy on being frustrated, instead of amplifying it by telling everyone about how bad this is, all of a sudden that energy's gone and I can just respond. And then time with friends, I spend doing things that are productive, that are joyful. And work, I get a lot more done instead of having all of that frustration simmering under me. The second thing that I found happens, this is where we start get weird. These get a little more weird as we move along. The second thing is that you change what bothers you within you. And all of a sudden, that person completely disappears from your life. It's really weird. I had a situation where there was a neighbor who, there was something they did about how they talked about things and such that annoyed me and really, really annoyed me. That fingernails on chalkboard setting me off. And I said, okay, something's going on in here in me. So it's where am I doing this? Where am I communicating in this way? And I realized I was doing that in certain relationships, and I shifted that in me. I shifted my behavior that was reflected by that person. It wasn't a literal reflection, but it was, that same sort of essence. All of a sudden, I never saw this neighbor for the next year. I mean, our kids played together. We were always seeing each other, did not see them for the next year. And then they moved across the country. It was very weird. I've seen that sort of stuff happens, that you change what happens and then you don't need the mirror. They disappear from your life. That's really kind of weird. But the third is the really spooky one. And this is where you change yourself and then all of a sudden they shift without you saying or doing anything. Where I encountered this once was with my dad. My dad worries like crazy. He's been through so much stress, so much trauma. He had been through so much in his life. And I'd learned that from him. And I was to the point where I could not do that, but I did not want to let go of it. I have learned enough Jedi mind tricks that I can defuse that worry very easily in me. But I didn't want to do it because I was afraid number two would happen and he would disappear from my life. I didn't want to lose Dad from my life. And so I just kept going until I hit a point where I could not continue. And I said, I have to change this. So I just went inside and I defused the trigger for worry in me. And literally that day, his worry did not go away, but it went from like a 10 out of 10 to a 5 or 6. It was amazing. I did not say anything to him. I did not change anything in our relationship, but I changed me and he shifted. I have no idea how this works, and it's kind of spooky, but it was amazing. So that's the key thing of the mirror principle is these people that annoy you, they are actually helping you find something you may not have faced in yourself in that blind spot in the Johari window. And if you can say, okay, what is it in me that's reflecting that? Where am I having some essence of that behavior, not the literal behavior? You shift that, you heal that. It will change your response. You will be much better able to respond instead of react to them. You'll be so much more resourceful. So, what can you do right now? What are some simple things? Well, I've got 2 things that you can work on. Number 1 is to use the mirror principle to identify some of your values, some of your strengths. Because one of the things I've found is that so many people do not acknowledge their strengths. They don't look at what's good about themselves. It's like, you shouldn't self-aggrandize yourself. Well, I believe that excessive pride is a sin, but so is false humility. There's a line in between of strong self-assurance that where we know ourselves. It's not getting full of ourselves with ego, but it's not dismissing ourselves. So take some time to reflect and think about who are the people in life that you really admire and why do you admire them? If you had to mind read, take a guess as if you could about what their values could be that they live by. What is it that they do? What are their behaviors? What are their values that you think makes you admire them so much? And then start to reflect on, okay, how am I living these values? How am I living these behaviors? How are they motivating me? Start to find your strengths through who you admire. And then once you've done that, and I really recommend you start with that, this is a muscle that we're building, then start to think about someone who really, really sets you off, or certain behavior that you see that really sets you off, that triggers you, that not just that, oh, that's wrong, that's not right to do that, but has that strong, intense emotional response. And sort of put them inside and say, okay, this type of behavior, where in my life could I be living that? Not literally, but some aspect of it. And again, it may not be with someone else. If it's something like being disrespectful or bullying, it may not be that you're bullying someone else, but it could be with yourself, in your own relationship with yourself. Where are you not respecting yourself? Where are you not doing what you know you should do? So how can you find what they are showing you that you could look at in yourself? And as you address that, once you know that, you say, okay, how can I, for example, honor myself more in this? How can I respect what I want, create more time for me? Quite often you're trying to do everything for everybody, but you're ignoring yourself. So how could you take on more for others, but also make time for you? How can you portion away a few minutes for yourself to honor yourself? This is just an example. You've got to find it for you. And if it's difficult for you to do this, either of these, you can always do it with a friend. Have a conversation with someone you know really well, and say, what's going on here? Because again, with the Johari window, there are aspects of your personality that they see that you may not be aware of. So they can help you in a lot of ways find what's going on here, what's triggering this. And having these conversations are amazingly rich. And what both of these do is they put back control in you. One of the biggest things that builds stress, that destroys resilience, is focusing on what you cannot control. This brings back control to yourself, where you can control yourself. Your personal power can get increased, which is what grows your resilience, which is what reduces stress and pressure. And the more that you can focus on what you can control, the better the quality of your life. So I would love to hear more about how you play with this, how you apply it. If you want to discuss this, please drop it in the comments and such. I would love it if you find this of value, if you could put a review in and share it with some of your friends or on social media. This podcast is available everywhere you can get podcasts, whatever your favorite services. Would really appreciate it if you can rate and review this and share it with your friends, because if you find it of value, people I suspect, would as well. Thank you so much. I am Ravi Tangri, and this is Soulgeneering Your Life and Your Work. I've got the energy.